I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid. And I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy.
A tax deduction to start up a business. I could see that as being helpful if you have the money already to start up a business. However, if you're in the lower and middle class, you don't have that kind of money to start up a business to ever receive that benefit. But if you're in the lower and middle class, you don't have the money to start up a business, so you would never receive that kind of benefit. I think we need to take a detour for a moment. So this right here was from a year ago, okay?
Even though Trump skipped last night's Republican primary debate, his presence was still felt. The event also opened up with a nod to a breakout country song from Virginia. The first question asked of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis was respond to the popularity of Richmond, north of Richmond, by Farmville singer Oliver Anthony. The candidate said it's because the country is in decline.
We must reverse Bidenomics so that middle-class families have a chance to succeed again. We cannot succeed as a country if you are working hard and you can't afford groceries, a car, or a new home.
The viral song, hailed as a working-class anthem, topped the Billboard 100 chart almost overnight.
So here's the point that I just made, okay? Now, some of you guys probably already know exactly where I'm getting ready to go with this. That was a year ago. And the economy was the first thing that was brought up. Now, they have had a whole year since then, knowing that, that was going to be a major issue, right? So it seems like at the very least, once that debate happened and once, they actually brought that up, right, was that the economy and inflation and everything else is just out of control. You would think if Biden and Harris, wanted to hold on to their positions, they would have got together and said, yeah, we got to do something about this. Did they come up with any plans? Were they doing anything at all? I think that's what Trump's probably getting ready to bring up here.
Tariffs on other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80.
Harris, respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance.
So I actually did some research into Project 2025. Okay. Now, it is true that some of the people that had worked with Donald Trump are behind that thing, right? So that was the Heritage Foundation, I think. And I'd watched some videos, from them. And what they were saying in there was that they're not directly working with any president. Okay? So this isn't a presidential plan, what they've got here. This is something that, whoever wins, this is something they're going to try and bring to that president, okay, and they're going to try and get them to sign off on it.
Of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us, and I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill.
Well, this is about to get interesting. So, on a lot of issues, I lean to the left, okay? There's a few issues, however, I just can't. And this is one of them.
Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions, very important. but we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar.
You know, here's an issue I have with this, right? You know, the whole concept of, you know, emergencies and extreme situations. One thing I've argued, and I've had quite a few people try and argue against what my philosophy is, right? Is that those are not abortions. And then they say, well, you're aborting the pregnancy, so it's an abortion. No. An abortion is not about aborting the pregnancy. That is just naturally going to happen during that process, all right? An abortion is about aborting the life of the baby, okay? That is an abortion. They're actually trying to conflate, you know, different things and make everything an abortion. You know, and the difference is in an emergency situation, the process is going to be much different than if it was an actual abortion, right? Because the doctors would actually try and care for both people.
Every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans.
Yeah, I would like her to be more specific when she refers to healthcare.
That make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime, a violation to their body, does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car.
You know, so obviously I am against abortion, but if they are so far against abortion that they're also, you know, criminalizing someone for just having a miscarriage, right? You know, unless they've done something, you know, on purpose in order to have a miscarriage, I would obviously see that as an abortion.
If Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made.
So I think if something is medically necessary, right, then I absolutely agree. It shouldn't be for, you know, me to get involved with it. It shouldn't be for anyone else to get involved with it. It shouldn't be for politicians to get involved with it, right? That should not be, a controversial issue. But she keeps bringing up like assaults and that kind of thing, right? And generally speaking, you're not going to, wait over 6 or 7 weeks before you decide to do something about, the effects of having been assaulted like that, right? You're going to be dealing with that right after it happens.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting.
I have to side with Trump on this. I just have to. Okay? Because I did research into this. And most of the Democrats and liberals and everyone on the left, they call this an abortion outright ban. And it's just not. What Trump is saying right here is actually what happened. It brought it back to the states and let states vote and decide which way they were going to go on the issue. And even states that, allow it, there should be a deadline after that point to where they say absolutely not. And I would say brain activity or heartbeat, absolutely not. And I think that's reasonable.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, and that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot.
You should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer the question? Would you
because
veto?
Under Roe v. Wade,
Answer the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth.
Well, as you can see, she didn't want to answer that, now did she?
Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden. He says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, "We won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote." Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did, in fact, lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
So I did see Rudy Giuliani sit in court, and when he was asked by the judge, he said this was not a fraud case. So it was real interesting that they went from, we got mountains and mountains of evidence, but then when Rudy Giuliani finally got in front of a judge, then it was like, oh, this isn't a fraud case.
What standard of review should I apply and why? What standard of review should I apply in this case?
On a motion to dismiss? Well, I mean, I think the normal one, which is that you have to deem the factual allegations to be correct. And even if they are correct, you have to find that there's no merit, no legal theory on which we can get relief.
Well, let me ask you, are you arguing then that strict scrutiny should apply here?
No, the normal scrutiny should apply. If we had alleged fraud, yes, but this is not a fraud case.
Let me just say about world leaders.
Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us.
So how many of you guys watched Starship Troopers? Okay. Now, for the longest time, I never actually realized, you know, the bigger message behind the movie, right? You know, because no one in the movie ever questions the media and the way the media reported, you know, the asteroid hitting Earth, right? No one ever questioned it. So the audience is a lot more likely to go along with the story. The bugs did that. But I've actually watched a lot of videos talking about this. And it actually shows, one of the spaceships hitting one of the asteroids. And what they said is that by them hitting those asteroids and different things like that, that's probably what, directed one of those asteroids to go towards Earth, right? And not only that, looking at how far away the bug's planet was and the technology they would have needed in order to, send an asteroid toward Earth. So the basic message of the movie was, showing how propaganda can cause a lot of unnecessary death. Okay, that's what we saw in that movie. If the military and, all the soldiers, and if everyone was questioning that rhetoric that, oh, the bugs did it, the bugs, nuked us, they nuked our home, right? It would have been a lot harder to get, that many troops together to go and invade that other planet, when they could have let that other planet alone and not even went there in the first place. And that was the main point of the movie. And then at the end of the movie, when, the soldier said, it's scared, it's scared. That really says a lot, because after all, they came to their planet to invade them. And so, they showed up with guns and everything else, so those bugs were just doing nothing but defending themselves. They were there to nuke them, so of course they're gonna fight back. But none of those soldiers saw it that way. So I said all that just to get this simple point across. If making deals is going to prevent conflict, and not just that immediate conflict, I'm actually referring to, even future conflicts, right? Because the simple fact is, we can't, look at one group of people and say, yeah, let's do whatever it takes to resolve this conflict, and then have that group of people then turn around and start, initiating wars with other countries. And then we're just going to sit back and say, yeah, that's fine, that's great, whatever, we don't care. We can only allow that to go on for so long, because the more, that country goes and dominates and takes over other territories, they get stronger and stronger. So this is a very complicated, topic, right? There's a lot of different moving pieces. But if making a deal with terrorists would keep terrorists from wanting to attack us, and hopefully, get those terrorists to start to rethink, right? Now, of course, I know that's a long shot, but, each terrorist is going to be different. And I would certainly think that at least some terrorists fit into that category of those bugs, right? It's the same mentality, probably for some terrorists at least, that they're going to attack us regardless, so we need to go attack them. Just to show them what they're up against. Which is a poor strategy, because if you're attacking someone, you're initiating conflict, and that person is going to be just like those bugs and defend themselves. So basically, the point I'm trying to make is, there's no, like, obvious answer to every single conflict. I think each situation should be, strategically evaluated. If Trump made a good deal with those people and prevented, the loss of American soldiers, then I don't see an issue with it. But if they had continued to plot against us or continued to, you know, capture more soldiers and this and that, then hopefully Trump would have came back and said, hey, wait a minute, we got a problem here. And especially if they were, trying to plot against us. But with Trump making deals with them, maybe that would have, made them plotting against us less likely.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal and, in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe?
So I actually did some research into this, and what I found was, and a lot of people are saying, she's not black, right? And all this other stuff. Well, I did some research and I found out that, so her heritage is African. And there was, and of course, we did a video and we saw that she also identifies as Indian, right? So she is of mixed race. And personally, I don't think it's that bad just to wonder, like, what race someone actually is. Because sometimes it's not easy to tell. And frankly, when Trump was asked about this stuff, I think because Trump didn't, like, all of a sudden not want to, talk about any of that stuff, he still kept with the same energy as he always did. That leads me to believe that he's definitely not as racist as they claim he is. I think if he had that much racism, right, of all the things that he talks about, then being in that setting, he would know, like, okay, this is where I need to turn that energy off, right?
It's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent.
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something, I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black.
I think I have to agree with what Trump's saying right now. It is not that important. That should not be her only qualification, right? Is what her race is. It is, important to a small degree, but there's a lot more important things, like what her policies are, what kind of deals she would want to make, that kind of thing. Those are the things that's actually a lot more important.
That she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of...
Yeah, but he's saying right now that it doesn't matter. See, that's what I'm not really understanding. If he's saying, what race you are doesn't matter to him, how are you then saying he's trying to use race to divide us? If he was saying, you know, her being black or of this heritage or whatever else, if he's saying, okay, that makes you inferior, then I would agree with her. Then I would say, oh yeah, that's definitely racist, right? But that's not what he's saying.
Many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person.
So sometimes people get steamrolled by the judicial system and they plead guilty to stuff they didn't actually do. What we have here is Trump saying, I don't see color. Color is not important in this specific situation. The simplest way I can put this as far as race goes, one thing that I've said quite a few times, a lot of people focus way too much on race. It's like every single issue that comes up, we have to put race into the equation.
Their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it,
Vice
pass as
President
prologue
Harris, thank
in terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot
She made
of...
a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans in particular.
So I remember when I was working, before we ever had Obamacare, what they told me was, whenever I got insurance, they said, they would not cover any pre-existing conditions. Okay. And supposedly after Obamacare, that's when, they reversed that. And they, basically said that your insurance through your employer wouldn't be able to deny you coverage for pre-existing conditions. So I think, there's going to be, good and bad with it.
The environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said the climate change.
So I actually think climate change is real, but I can't imagine, how they have proof that, human beings are actually causing it, right? By pollution and all these other things. And especially, where a lot of them have this deadline for Like, once we go past that and we still haven't got our emissions below a certain point, then, it's like no turning back. We can't fix it after that point. And it's like, what scientific experiment or, whatever else did you guys do to come up with, that data? Or were they just guessing? I think that's what it is. I think a lot of that stuff is just guessing in order to, get people on board to go along with whatever regulations they want us to, right? That's what I think it is.
Change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as Vice President over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been Vice President. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Shawn Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million?
One thing I have to point out here, Ukraine is an ally to the United States. So I think we do have to take that into account, right? That's not to say that means it couldn't be anything at first, because it absolutely could be. But to say that, having a deal with Ukraine or anyone else is automatically nefarious, I wouldn't agree with that statement.
Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years.
Oh, you know, I really thought we were going to get this response at the very beginning. Okay, we're getting to it at the very end, and I completely forgot about it, right? But we're finally getting to it. We're finally getting to the part where it's like, why hasn't she done it? That's why I showed, you know, the debate from a year ago, whenever they brought that song up and was like talking about, you know, how inflation is out of control and how, you know, the economy is bad and all these other things. You know, and did we hear, you know, Biden or Kamala, you know, get on TV and have press conferences and start talking about the economy of what we could do to, you know, any kind of plan at all? Not that I've seen.
They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it?
And to reduce inflation, there's that too.
She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like, we're not going to frack, we're not going to take fossil.
So he does make a really interesting point right here, that instead of saying, you know, if re-elected, we would start doing this, we'd start doing that. And he's saying, look, why don't you do that right now? Why do the people have to vote in order to, like, see what you know, will do then? He's like, you know, you're the vice president right now. You're not trying to become, you know, the vice president or trying to achieve, you know, that status. You're that status right now. You know, the point that he's making right now is you have the ability to do something now. So I think if she wants to have a chance, she's going to have to start implementing policy now that's going to reduce inflation. You know, if she can do that, she might have a chance.
We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in.
Yeah, so that was, pretty interesting. And one of the things I want to touch on before we end the video, right? So Kamala's last part there, she was talking about, the right for women to do what they want with their own bodies. And I get that. That's something that they want, okay? But at the same time, we also have to consider that, there are human lives at stake too. So these videos are made to have discussions, okay? I am more than willing to listen to anyone's opinion. So feel free to put in the comments and give any kind of feedback or criticism you want. Alright, that's it for now, y'all.